and face the challenge squarely, the deceptive fraud of sustainable development will quickly come to light. America will rise to restore liberty through an order.
Too many people in America fear their government, and the government is being run by too many powerful agencies like the IRS and others. I think it's time the people take the country back through their representative government.
Hey, Mr. Politician, living on that hill, living in that life of luxury, on we the people's bill. Don't have a clue how the other half lives, and that is a shame. It's time to stop the tyranny. You keep pushing through your bills, calling for revolution, calling for it now. It's time to save our Constitution while we still got the guns in our hands.
Hi, it's Renee Kimball here for Freedom TV, and I didn't tell you last week what the show is going to be about because I wanted it to be a surprise. And what we're going to be talking about this week is preparedness, getting yourself ready for any eventualities or some things that could possibly be happening in the near future. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but first I do have two announcements. One, we're going to have the phones open for the whole show this time, so if you have any questions about preparedness or about the items that I'm showing you, please just use the phone number, give us a call, and we'll try and answer your question the best that we can. I am not the Oracle of Delphi, nor do I know everything there is to know about preparedness, so you can probably teach me a couple of things. One of the things that I did want to mention is we had a replay of one of our shows in which we asked, where in Portland will you find the Bill of Rights? What park? And we did have a winner. He called in and gave it to us, and it was Jim Robeson, and he did win a copy of Michael Badnarek's book, Good to be King. So you can win great stuff on the show if you answer the right question the right way. And to that end, we're going to be giving you an opportunity to win this DVD, which is Gene Ward, and we're going to be seeing a segment for Surviving and Thriving from Gene Ward, so you get to see a little bit about what's on this DVD. And it's really an exceptional preparedness and survival DVD with a lot of really good information, very well done. So we're going to think of a contest between now and the middle of the show. So this will be the prize today. And with that, we're going to go into seeing our first segment, which is Surviving and Thriving. And this is with Gene Ward. And I believe the first part is pup tents. Hi, we're having a little problem with the tape, and we're going to have that coming up in just a minute. But in the meantime, I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the things that we're going to be showing you. One of my great endeavors is worms, everything having to do with worms. And if you would like a copy of any of the things that we present on the show, including, this is the little pamphlet that we do. It's called Worms Without Very Much Work, and it's all about how to build a worm bin that is very easy, not the cheapest in the world, but it does give you an opportunity to build it once and you're all done. I'm going to open it up and so you can see the inside and see what the worm bunker looks like. And we like to promote wormdom and composting your food scraps. Let's see if we can get a picture of that. That's actually the worm bunker. And it's built out, oh, well, not very well, you can't see it, but it's built out of cinder blocks, has a permeable bottom, and you can, once you do build this worm bin, you're not going to have to build it again for a very, very long time. So, compliments of the worm bin or the worm bunker. We have this you can get for free. Just email us at the address that keeps coming up periodically, so write that down. It's renee@enoughwaste.com. You can get the complete designs for the bunker, and also you can get some cute little sampling of things you can do with worm castings, and it's a nice little pamphlet that goes with the worm castings, and on the back of it is why I put worm castings together. So call and you can have either of those little things, and you will be able to do your own worm bin. And once you've been doing worm bin for a while, you'll see how valuable the worm castings are and the ease of which you can get rid of all kinds of organic garbage. Okay, I think we're ready for our roll-in, so we're going to go to Surviving and Thriving with Jean Ward and pup tents.
First, I need to make a height adjustment and move the line up the tree to about the middle of my chest. With the bag still attached to the line, I'll use the scissors from my Leatherman Wave to cut a straight line along the bottom edge. At each corner, I attach 6 inches of duct tape at a 45-degree angle, massaging it into the wet plastic sheeting and doubling it back for additional strength. Next, I'll pull the plastic down to determine the location of my stakes. By folding the tape back an inch or so, I can cut a small diamond opening just big enough for the parachute line to fit through. This will allow me to stake down each corner of the shelter fairly tight. If I decide the shelter needs more protection from the wind, I can add an additional stake to the center. This shelter required about the same amount of time as the tube tent, and it will easily withstand light to moderate wind conditions. If, however, you think that the wind is going to pose a problem, we can take care of that too. Before I can begin constructing my storm shelter, I'm going to need 12 reasonably straight poles. Each of them should be about 7 feet in length and about the width of my finger. Using the saw blade on my knife, cutting this many green poles shouldn't take me too long. I won't be using the much larger bags for this shelter. Instead, I'm going to be using 2 60-gallon high-density garbage bags. These 60-gallon garbage bags, when cut open, measure 5 by 6.5 feet each. I begin my construction by duct taping each corner to the 4 poles that I lash securely together with zip ties. Normally, I only carry about 20 feet of duct tape on a flat roll, so I do need to be somewhat conservative with the lengths of my strips. I try to keep them less than 6 inches each. Otherwise, I'll run out before I finish my shelter. By using zip ties instead of lashing the poles together with a parachute cord, I have been able to create a whole new series of survival shelters. Now I can construct strong, complex frameworks that are perhaps 10 to 20 times faster, and it's so much easier. Almost anyone can do it. I can make my shelter covering much tighter by adding 2 more poles across the center of my panels. I do this in order to keep the side poles from being pulled inward when I tape the plastic to them. The purpose of having a pole framework is to be able to stretch the plastic sheeting outward. Tight shelters are much more weather and wind resistant, and they are much quieter. Using duct tape will not only allow me to get the panels drum tight, but they will also add stability to the panels as well. Like the previous 2 shelters, these shelters go up very quickly, and they're surprisingly simple. But more important, they make an excellent emergency storm shelter. 1 panel alone will provide some degree of protection from the rain by leaning it up against a line tied between 2 trees, or just leaning it up against a tree. But I have never considered a lean-to to be an adequate survival shelter. By adding an additional panel, I can create a much more suitable shelter. The small gap at the top can be minimized by zip tying both ridge poles together in several locations. Now I have a shelter that will protect me from just about anything that Mother Nature decides to throw at me. But it also has an additional feature that's virtually unheard of in survival shelters. By adding 2 vertical poles placed approximately 3 feet out from the bottom of the panel, I can create a much roomier working area that will keep me out from under the weather. All it takes is a couple more zip ties. What more could you ask for from a shelter that will literally fit in your back pocket? Actually, I haven't shown you the best feature of this shelter just yet. We'll get to that later.
Hi, welcome back to Freedom TV. And this whole segment is about preparedness and surviving. And we're going to address a few issues. And most of the problems that people have in this whole area is starting. Because if you look at preparedness, it can seem incredibly overwhelming. There's so many pieces, and there's so many ways of doing everything. There's so many different kinds of food, and you can just get into the too hard basket very quickly. Well, we've made it kind of a little bit easier for you, and we've created the hierarchy of things that you'll need. And in the order of this hierarchy is how you want to look for the things that you'll need to be prepared. Now we're going to look at the first CG, and this is a screen that'll give you, the first basic question is, where do you start? And this screen will give you an idea of what the elements are that you need to answer that question. So the screen that says, where to begin? Where do we start? How does it begin in the very beginning? So there are 4 basic issues, and the first of the 4 issues is air, okay? You can go 3 minutes without air. If you don't have enough air, well, don't worry about the other 3 because you're not going to be alive for more than 3 minutes, so hey, that's the end of it. Second on the hierarchy, contrary to what most people think, is not food, it is heat. In other words, you've got to start thinking about your shelter, because the shelter will enable you to provide for the other 2 things. If you're too hot or you're too cold, or if you're sick and you can't move and you're not protected from the elements, you're not going to be able to look for food and water. The third one, again, 3 days and you need water. So it is next in list after your shelter. And last on the list is actually food, because you can go between 30 and 40 days without actually intaking any food whatsoever. So begin at the beginning, and the first thing you need when you're being prepared, either at home or in the woods, is your shelter. And what we're going to look at now are some things about the shelter. These are just some questions that you'll need to ask yourself about your shelter, whether you're in the woods or if you're sheltering at home or at school or a workplace, wherever you are. These are questions that you want to actually look at and decide, well, is this shelter going to be the right place for me? The second screen on shelter has a few more descriptive questions that you need to ask yourself. And anything that you see here or anything that we talk about, if you'd like a handout, just email me at the email that'll keep coming up with my name, and I'll send you a copy of everything that we talked about today and a whole list of references and websites and places where you can learn a lot more information. So shelter is pretty determined by the individual, and it is very individual. So we're not going to look at the different kinds of things that you can do for shelter. That's I'm going to leave up to you. But again, answer these questions and you'll be pretty much on the road to having an adequate shelter. The main thing that we're going to look at now has to do with water and with food. These are the main areas that take the greatest amount of time. Now I've got some things here to show you about food, and we'll start out with something that is quite old actually. This container is a original storage unit from the 70s when this first came about, this whole idea of being prepared, outside of the Mormons. The Mormons have always been on to doing preparedness. But this is a nitrogen pack, and this is supposedly lasts between 20 and 30 years. It's already probably about 20, 25 years old now. And this is wheat, and the only way to tell whether it has stayed alive is to take it out of the can and sprout it. If the wheat sprouts, then you know it's alive and the food has lasted the full length of time. So this was nitrogen pack in its day and was supposedly going to last you a minimum of 30 years. From the same time era is the original book, Stocking Up, which is quite a classic as far as preparedness goes. However, there are many, many, many other books that have superseded the information in that. Not to say that the information is incorrect or wrong, it's just that there have been additions and extensions to the information. So while it's a good basic book, it shouldn't be the only book in your arsenal of ways to do things. One thing in particular in the reference of books that I would like to bring up is these are two books that I came across, Mix a Meal and Preserving Food. Now these books have a very different idea about food preservation and making things easy. The Mix a Meal book has to do with mixing up dry mixes with powdered egg, powdered milk, powdered butter, shortening, everything dried, and then you prepare that ahead of time, and what you actually wind up doing is only adding water. So that's the idea and the concept behind Mix a Meal, and you can use it for cornbread, bread, cookies. They even have a cheese sauce that you can make out of the powdered cheese product, which is actually quite good. The second book, Preserving Food Without Freezing and Canning. Now this is rather an unusual book. This has to do with fermenting fruit and vegetables, mainly vegetables, and doing what's called krauting them. So you turn them into a very, very high acid combination that's usually done in a crock, but you can do it in jars. And you preserve it that way in the juices of the fermentation. And that's a whole book on just the various and sundry ways that you can go about preserving foods without using canning or freezing. So this is one of my favorite books because I'm learning how to kraut all kinds of really unusual things like huge zucchinis. I've done cabbage before and made sauerkraut. That's really excellent. But apparently you can kraut anything, any kind of vegetable you can put in the krauting process, and it will be fairly safe. The two main things about preserving foods, and one of the mainstays that you should have in any library on preparedness, is a Ball's Blue Book. This is put out by the Ball Preserving Company, and there's actually an online version now. And it's best to get the most up-to-date one, but do remember people have been doing this for hundreds of years, and there are far fewer deaths from botulism than you actually think. However, it is a concern here in the Northwest, where the Northwest area, Oregon and Washington, have the highest incidence of botulism anywhere in the world. So when you're preserving food, that is a consideration here in the Northwest. So get a canning book by the Ball Blue Book, and that'll give you all of the requisites that you need for both pressure cooker canning of the low acid foods like vegetables and meats, and the high acid canning in a water bath, which would be the fruits and certain vegetables like tomato sauce, tomatoes, as long as you put citric acid with them. Wheat is one of the mainstays of diet, and there's a lot of stuff coming out recently about how to do wheat, as opposed to whether you should keep it completely away from air or whether you should aerate the bucket once a year. So there's two schools of thought here. The only advice I can give anyone is put some away under each method and see which one works the best. Everything is trial and error. And do we have a phone caller, or is someone calling in? Okay. No, they're just directing me to the right camera so I look in the right place, which I'm trying very hard to do. Now, another thing that I'd like to talk about is emergency preparedness food. When you start thinking about being out and about, say in your car for 72 hours, you can get these packs of food. I know it doesn't look much like food. It looks like an aluminum checkerboard. But each little one of these little squares is equal to about an 1,800 to 2,000 calorie meal. So you would take 3 of these per day, and this would last you 3 days or 72 hours. So this is emergency prepared rations. Probably not the most tasty thing in the world, but it's also not offensive because it has usually has a high amount of sugar in it, usually very tasty and good texture to make you want to eat as much as you have of it, so that you will get the calories. The other thing is, this is how water comes in preparedness kits. That comes in little half-cup pouches, and this would be measured out and sterile, and you would be able to know exactly how much water you're consuming. The other thing that's really nice about them is they are giftable. You could, if you met somebody and you wanted to give them, you couldn't give them any food or help them out, but you could give them a packet of water, which may help sustain them for another day. The recommended amount of water that you need for 72 hours is 12 of these. So you're talking about a fair amount of weight. And a little bit later, what we're going to be doing is talking about the pack, the backpack. This is hopefully the thing standing between you and perishing if you have to get out of someplace and get to someplace else quickly. And one of the things you would want to have in this for a 72-hour trip or a duration would be 12 of these little packs. Now, the general amount of weight of water is 1 pint a pound the world around. So one of these would be half a pint. So 4 of these would equal 1 pound. So you're carrying already, before you've even put anything else in your pack, you're carrying 3 pounds of water. So it's good to remember that wherever you're going to go, you're going to have to carry everything you need with you. And again, this is about 1.5 pounds. So again, now you're up to 4.5 pounds, and you haven't put anything else into your backpack. So again, weight is everything in your backpack. Now, let's see, I have a couple of other things that I wanted to show you about. We're going to have a second roll-in very shortly. And in fact, I think we're over time. So we're going to go to our second roll-in. And this is a very different idea about the population explosion. This is a different perspective, and it's called demographic winter. It's actually talking about the possibility of certain parts of the world not having enough people to replicate the culture. So we'll go in for a short break, and this is called demographic winter. Well, we're not going into it, so I'll continue. Okay. Well, let me show you one more quick thing before we go into the demographic winner. This is a cute little first aid kit, and it's really mandatory to have one of these wherever you are, whether you're at home, whether you're at work, whether you're at school. This one is old, very old as a matter of fact, but it's still very good. And I'm not sure you can see all the little bits and pieces that I've got in it. But there's little towelettes and Band-Aids. Let's see what else. An alcohol cleaning pad. I don't know whether that's probably any good at this point. There's even little ampules in here for helping you regain consciousness. So this one's very old. And with that, we're going to go into another little short called Demographic Winter.
Catastrophically falling birth rates, well below the replacement level.
It's entirely possible that the French will disappear. There will be no native-born French that come from the traditional French population.
What some call the demographic winter of Western societies.
It's happening in rich countries, it's happening in poor countries, it's happening in Catholic countries, Islamic countries, and that is everywhere. People are having fewer and fewer children. Never in history have we had economic prosperity accompanied by depopulation.
When there are too many old people and not very many young people to work and to look after them, which is what's on the books now, mathematically speaking, you're going to have economic collapse. There won't be enough people to run the trains or pay the taxes.
For those of us who were raised to believe in the teachings of Thomas Malthus or Charles Darwin, for example, these trends are very hard to absorb.
And for such a small nation as Latvia, it might even endanger the survival of our nation.
The only way you can sort of preserve the theory is to say, well, certain kinds of human beings are on the way to extinction.
Now we have 40 years of social science that makes it absolutely clear that the deterioration of marriage, the encouragement of sexuality outside of marriage is just not, it's not good for society, women, children, or men.
On every measure, ever measured by the social sciences, the intact married family is the strongest on every outcome ever measured.
We, as the policymakers, think that the best way to improve the demographic situation is by strengthening the families.
It's also true, I think, for people who are worried about women's rights, about the gay rights, about environmentalism. All of these movements are deeply informed by a 1970s era preoccupation with the so-called population bomb.
Hi, welcome back to Freedom TV, and this is the segment all about preparedness and survival. We have a question for you. We're going to put it out to the audience, and remember, this is an all call-in show, so you can call in with any questions or comments. But our question to win this wonderful video called Survival and Outdoor Safety by Jean Ward. The question is, how do you make fire by using ice? Okay, you have to answer that question, and you can win. The first one to answer this question gets this wonderful DVD, and I think you'll really enjoy it. In fact, right now, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the survival pack that they show in the DVD. And this is, it comes in a little pouch. This is the pouch that it comes in. So you can see it's a very, we keep one in our car. It's not very big. Weighs about 2.5 pounds. So it's not, you know, an onerous thing to even, you know, just put in your backpack or stuff in your jacket and take off with. And inside, you saw Gene Ward doing the pup tent, and those are the bags that he has inside of the kit, so that you can make those pup tents that he was showing and the lean-tos. Then the parachute cord, which is kind of really cool. There's 50 feet of it, so you don't have to worry about not having enough cord for everything. The orange gaffer tape, which doubles for safety. Well, maybe you don't want to have anybody to know where you are, so maybe you'd use a different color or camouflage it. But if you want people to see you, then you have the tape that is reflective, which is really kind of cool. The zip ties that he was talking about, there's a big package of those in there, and you can do just about anything with the zip ties. It's a very, very useful tool. This is the flint striker, and this has magnesium up at the top, the little, let me see if I can take it out of the bag and you can see it a little bit better. The point has a magnesium on it, and then what you do is scrape off some of the magnesium like that. Let me see, and you scrape it into a pile, and then I believe you strike it here and create a spark into your pile of the magnesium, and it ignites, and then it ignites little bits of debris and pine needles, leaves, whatever you've got to start a fire. And there's all kinds of little instructions in there. It's called the SOS fire starter. Then this is something that Gene Ward came up with. I thought it was just the most clever thing I've ever seen. It's basically a little foil tin, and it's got a foil top on it, and inside are cotton balls that are totally soaked in Vaseline. So you cut a little X across here, open this back, pull out a little bit of the cotton to make a wick, and light it, and this will last up to 30 hours. So this little tiny thing is enough to provide you with light, start a fire, whatever you need for a good long time. That's a very clever way of having a continuous fire going. This one is the signal mirror that they recommend, and you can, I don't know whether you can see this very well, but you actually sight through the hole in the mirror. This is how you actually sight where you're looking to, so that you can be spotted, and this will reflect exactly where you're sighting to. So this is one of the better inventions since stocking up came out. So this is a very good little case, and you might want to augment it with a few things that I've learned from Chris Janowski. There's a needle here, but I think I would want to put in some fishing hooks, some fishing line. You could add a little bit of added little bits to this particular kit. And we have a phone call. Yes, do you have a question?
I think I have the answer to your question, how to make fire from ice.
Okay, how do you do it?
I imagine you'd use a piece of ice as a magnifying glass.
Aha, okay. Good, good, excellent. You win.
All
You
right.
win. So give your name and contact information to the person who's doing the phones,
All right.
and you will get your DVD of Survival and Outdoor Safety, and it's great. You're really, really going to enjoy it. So, and very good. You're well on your way with knowing the answer to that question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, see? Yay. Now I learned something. I didn't know that you could do that with ice. You could form it into a lens and use it to focus the sun, and you could start a fire with a piece of ice. Kind of unimaginable, but I guess you could do it. So that was the survival kit that I would augment a little bit with a couple of other things. But basically, in 2.5 pounds, you've got just about everything you need to stay alive for a good long while, especially if you've got the video to tell you how. There's just a couple other little things I want to show you about before we go to another roll-in. This is my personal favorite, and this is actually a local company right here in the Northwest. This is the Leatherman Wave. This is the tool of choice for most survival people. It does a myriad of things, and there's needle nose pliers, which I don't know how many times, that's the one tool you always wish you have when you're out in the woods, is needle nose pliers. And this one comes complete with everything. It's an amazing little tool, and it's got all kinds of extra little knives in it. And one improvement that even Leatherman has done is now the blades and the implements lock, so that they don't collapse on you, which is really great. And then when you want to release them, you just, well, I think you push on here, but I'm not sure. Ah! Well, we'll just leave it open for the rest of the show. I don't even know how to use my own knife, but you can see there's a file and a knife out. I thought it was, yeah, there it goes. Yay, I got, no, maybe not. No. But there are lots of other little things. Here's another serrated, like steak knife, and those all come out of the base of it. So you can see that there are a lot of tools that you can use, and it can sit in your back pocket. The other thing that I found most recently, we went to a show, and this is one of the more compact spoons and knife containers. I don't know whether you call them containers or a little built-in. And what's really nice is you push them and they come apart. And somebody, Bright Spark, was really smart. They finally put the knife on the opposite utensil as your fork. I don't know why, but most of them insist on putting your knife on the same one as your fork, which makes it really hard to like cut a piece of meat or cut up something and eat it. So that's a very clever little spoon and fork and knife unit that, if I can get it to go back together, goes back together and goes into a very tiny little pouch, which is even better. So there you go. Well, we're going to go to another short roll-in. This was a group who came on the show several weeks ago. Oh, do we have a caller? No? Okay. We'll come back to that. But we're going to have another short little roll-in about Dove Lewis. And they were on the show a couple weeks ago. A wonderful outfit. This is the 24-hour emergency care service here in Portland for pets. So a little roll-in with Dove Lewis.
Red-tailed hawk sitting in the middle of the freeway watching cars go by is not normal behavior.
Good Samaritans bring many stray and wild animals to Dove Lewis for care.
They do this to make themselves look scary.
A father and son found this red-tailed hawk in the middle of a highway and brought him to Dove Lewis.
He was on the freeway, in the middle of the freeway, just sitting watching the cars go by. They were able to encroach right up on him and scoop him right up.
Dove Lewis never turns away an injured stray or wild animal. Dove Lewis spends hundreds of thousands of dollars each year on medical care for these animals. A search for owners of lost pets is then launched on the Lost and Found Internet database.
Who are you going to go see? Oh, where's that?
Sometimes it's people who are sick, and Dove Lewis animal-assisted therapy teams come to their aid.
Hurty, come say hi to Candace.
Dove Lewis award-winning therapy program, another free community service, brings 200 volunteer teams, animals and their people, to various locations throughout the Portland metro area.
Oh, he likes that.
Hartley and his handler Naomi visit patients at Dornbecker Children's Hospital. Therapy teams also visit other hospitals and places like assisted living facilities, schools, and libraries.
There's the doggy. This is Hartley. Hartley. This is Hartley. Hartley, sit. Good boy. Oh my gosh. Hartley.
These therapists are specially trained to interact with people, helping to cheer them up and bring their stress level down.
Hi, Trinity. Do you want to visit from Hartley? Yeah? Okay. Can he come sit on your bed with you? Okay. You come here, and all the kids here at Dornbecker are so amazing, and I would say almost all of them have like a total love of dogs and animals. So for him to be able to come and sit up on a bed, and a kid to be able to pet a dog and be able to be having that sort of really outdoors almost experience while they're stuck in the hospital is just really great.
He loves kissing.
Yes, he does.
For children like Trinity, who get to pet and play with Hartley, it is the brightest part of their day.
It brings a lot of smiles to a lot of people, and that makes me really happy.
We at Dove Lewis believe in the invisible yet undeniable bond between humans and their beloved companions. We believe animals are not pets, they're gifts. We believe they speak to us and that their happiness is tied to ours. Dove Lewis exists because of this unique relationship. We are committed to providing Portland's best friends with the best in emergency critical care. If there were ever a place in this world that symbolized the love that people have for animals, it would be Dove Lewis.
Hi, welcome back to Freedom TV. And we've got a few more things to show you about preparedness. And again, if you want any of the information that you've seen here on the show or a list of references, just send me an email to the email address and I'll be happy to send you a PDF of all this and much more information. There's about 5 pages of references and about 5 pages of specific areas to think about when you're doing home preparedness. Now we're going to have a look at some of the interesting items we've got up here that you may not consider home preparedness things, but it's these are some of the elite upper end things that you think about for home preparedness, and probably the most high end would be pure creamery butter and cheese. Okay, now admittedly we're talking Velveeta here. It's not gourmet Gouda. However, if you've been without cheese for, say, 3 months, even, you know, American Velveeta cheese is going to taste pretty good. And it acts like cheese, and you can do all kinds of things to it. So these are some interesting ideas of things that I didn't even know that you could get in home preparedness. Would be the processed canned cheese and actual pure butter. You can get the powdered butter, which is fairly prominent, and use that for mixes, but every once in a while it's really nice to have some real butter, and that's where the can comes in. The rest of the things around here are different examples of things that people are storing now. Pears are coming in, and these are they'll start ripening over the next month or so, and you can use them fresh, you can dry them, or you can can them in syrup, either sugar syrup or their own juices, or even grape juice is a good way to preserve pears and keep that sweetness. Other things that store just like they are the butternut squash and the 2 pumpkins. These actually store, if the skins are not broken, they actually store quite a long time. As do apples. Apples store a lot longer than you would think. When you see an apple, you think of it storing, you know, being fairly thin-skinned. However, you have to remember that they did use these on board ship, and they would keep them for a couple months in barrels. So the apples will keep a very long time just as they are. But again, you can dry them, or you can put them in applesauce, or put them as apple pieces in a jar, and then maybe later make a pie or an apple crumble. So these are some thoughts about things for home preparedness and foods that you might consider keeping, if you especially have any outdoor area, on like your porch. You can keep several pumpkins, and as long as it doesn't go down to a really hard freeze for several days in a row, well then you've got some really good vegetables on your porch. So those are some of the things that I wanted to share with you about home preparedness. And if there are any questions, if you have any questions about home preparedness, I'd be happy to answer those, so please do call in. But we do have some recipes that I want to point out in the Mix-A-Meal book. One of the best recipes that I've found is the cornmeal and the cornbread one. This one is actually very easy, very labor not intensive, and makes making cornbread a whole heck of a lot easier. I've started using cornbread in a lot of different things that I never thought of using cornbread in again. Using it for like as almost like a pie pastry for other vegetables and things on top, and baking it in the oven. When you have it so easy to prepare, you do experiment a little bit more and try and use it in different ways. The area that we haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about is the other opposite end of the water. Now, with your water, there's lots of different ways to consider keeping water stored. You can either have acquired water, water that you've brought to the property in 50-gallon containers or 5-gallon containers, however you wanted to get there, and you've brought it to the property and you're storing it. Or you can have on-site storage by collecting rainwater, or you can have water that comes in through a spring or a creek. So you actually have production of water on site on the property. And there's all kinds of different ways to store this water and keep it in a potable form so that you're not going to get sick from using it. So I invite you to send me an email for the sheets, and I have a great list of references on that. And I think we have a phone call.
Yes,
Do you have a question?
Yes, I was wondering, do you have some information on how long some of these things keep, like dried foods and that mix-a-meal, those types of things?
Right. Yes, that's a very good question. There's a whole in the resources I send you out. There'll be a whole list of the different kinds of food and how long they last. But as a general overview, if you have nitrogen-packed, commercially canned, which is what this wheat was, this will supposedly last 20 to 30 years. Now, that's under ideal conditions. If you keep it at 78 degrees and it's always being hit with sun, I can guarantee it's not going to last 20 or 30 years. But if you keep it under 68 degrees in a cool, dry place, then something that's nitrogen-packed may last as long as 30, 35 years. I have some people who have opened them up after 35 years and the wheat still sprouted. So certain things under the nitrogen pack will last much longer than any other form. Next comes your freeze-dried, which is where all of the liquid is taken out, and that will last between, depending on what you have, between 3 and 7 years. Then you have just dehydrated food, which is what you would do in a home dryer, just dry it down to the smallest amount of moisture content. Those will usually last 2 to 5 years. Then things start going downhill from there. Your items like nuts and oils, those are really, they're not quite sure. There are some oils that say that will last up to 10 years. A lot of oils will not last more than 2. The same thing with the nuts. It's very hard to get them packaged in a way where they're going to last for longer than, say, 2-3 years at the absolute maximum. Now, we have a caller who has a question.
Yeah, hi. My
Hi.
name's Barrett.
Hi.
Gaffney, I know you. Barely. How can we stand up against this problem? How do we do it? I mean, really.
Well, probably the best way of doing it, of standing up against any of this, is getting yourself as prepared and as assured that you have done everything you can to keep yourself
I don't eat meat
above. Well,
anymore.
that's a start. The main thing is to look at.
We got to quit feeding the beast.
Well, The way you feed the beast is to feed yourself. So one of the things that you can do is to make sure that you have enough food for yourself and the people who are around you on hand at all times,
But I care
along
about
with
other
your
people
water.
around me too. So how can I maximize myself?
You start with the first thing, and that's where everybody starts. If you're in debt, if a person's in debt, that's the place where you start. You try and get out of debt, and then you try and move on to the next step, which would be trying to get yourself confident that you're going to have a good place and enough food and enough water to survive if, say, the electricity went out for 72 hours. Would you have enough? And that's where you start. You start with baby steps. So it's not something that ever ends, and it's not something that is too hard. People just have to start where they are and do it one step at a time. If you send me an email, I'll be sure and send you some basic guidelines as to areas that you want to look at. And then you can go as far as you want to go within those areas. It really depends on the person, because I know some people who are just totally focused on this, and that's about all they do is they think about ways they can store things or prepare things. Or for me, a big part of this is the things that I eat normally are not the things you find in food storage. There are no fresh vegetables per se. You know, you're not going to go out and get small baby bok choy in the middle of the winter. So you have to adapt what you're eating to what you have stored. If you can work more toward a vegetarian lifestyle, that's easier to store for. It's a lot quicker to store for, but it is also a lot harder to keep all of your nutrients balanced. So there's trade-offs in however you do it. But the most important thing is to start. And you start from where you are. And if where you are is that you have a job or you don't have a job and you have an apartment, well, then you look around and say, well, what can I do from here? And the first thing you can do is make sure you have enough food for 72 hours. That's the very, very first place to start when you want to think about preparedness, is do I have 72 hours worth of food? And then build up from there. And then you can start looking at the different types of food that you have and the different methodologies for storing it, whether it's nitrogen pack, dehydrated, freeze-dried, stuff that you've done in your home dryer, jarred stuff that you've put in a canner, dried meat. You could do dried jerky and things like that. Sausages, that's another way of preparing and storing food. Not all sausages are meat. There are some other sausages that incorporate a lot of grains that you can use for food storage also. So we have all kinds of books, all kinds of references, and there's a ton of websites out there. People ask me, okay, what's your favorite websites? Well, we don't have any listed here, but if you send me an email, I'll send you a whole swath of them. But probably my favorite website of all of them is Simply Living Smart. And Simply Living Smart has courses and little videos for you to look at, and you can really get an understanding from the very beginning how to put a food storage program together. And one of the neatest things about it is it doesn't treat you like a dummy, even though most of us are pretty ignorant of a lot of the methodologies for storing food. And at the same time, it gives you small chunks of knowledge so that you don't feel completely overwhelmed by the subject, because it's very easy to get overwhelmed by all of it. So we have water, food, supplies for immediately bugging out if you have to, a little 2.5-pound package that you can use if you have to take off. Then we have the backpack, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the backpack, because when people go and look for a backpack, they try and find the cheapest thing around, and they think, okay, well, this will work, this is fine. And when I went and got my backpack, I did something entirely different. I don't know whether you can see this. I tried it on. And I didn't just try it on empty. I had them open it up and then actually put inside 30 pounds. And this is the mattress, which is kind of cool. So if you put 30 pounds inside here and then you pack it on your back and you get it adjusted all correct, then you walk around the store for 30 minutes and see how you feel about that backpack. Because that's what you're going to be doing. You're not going to go out there day hiking for 15 minutes with 35 or 40 pounds in your back. You're going to be walking for hours, maybe days. So you want to make sure that your backpack is actually going to suit your needs and not kill you halfway to your destination. So spend a lot of time and a lot of money on your backpack and see what kind of little sections and bits and pieces that you can get into your backpack. This one is a nice little pouch, but this is actually a poncho. So this is a 2-in-1. So you can see you can pack a lot into a very small area. And that's a poncho with a hood. So that's it for preparedness. We're probably going to be doing this again sometime in the future, and we'll come back with some more information for you. But for right now, the most important thing you can do is to start. Wherever you are, wherever you've begun, just do something. And the first thing you can do is use your voice. Stand up for your rights and stand up for what you believe in. This is Freedom TV, and I'm Renee Kimball. And I hope you join us next week. We're going to have Emily Wisteria and the Art Garage. So from Freedom TV, and congratulations to the fellow who won this. Good on you. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
I cry for my country, for the pain that it's been through. She's been made to suffer for the profit of a few. Storm clouds are forming, winds of change now touch our shores. Our hear forefathers are crying as the dream's been cruised. America.